what you seek, you will find. Where your energy, where your focus goes, your energy flows, right? And we wanted that to be what bubbled into our awareness. Was it possible for us to find negative things happening around us? Sure. If we were looking for it, I'm sure we would have seen all kinds of things. That guy who was rude and bumped into me in the next to the baggage claim, or the Uber driver, the car smelled a little funny. I mean, you can find bad anywhere. If you're looking for it, you will find it, guaranteed. But we were so committed to this being the most magical 2 weeks of our life.
A positive thought is 1,000 times more powerful than a negative thought. And so I did a tremendous amount of work overriding what I wanted my experience to be. And then I created the feeling in my body of it being magical, of it being a joyous experience, of us walking away thinking, wow, that was a life-changing, amazing, awe-inspiring trip. Anniston gets to see where I'm from, and we just fall in love. I wanted to fall back in love with this country that I have loved so deeply for so long. And we started to create that experience, and that started first within me. Anniston was already there because she's always wanted to go, and she's always open and receptive. And so we started creating that feeling and that awe.
Welcome to the Empowered Life Podcast,
a space dedicated to spreading the message that you have the power within to create everything you seek.
So if you're ready to enroll in a new kind of higher learning, the kind that leads to true personal freedom, hang here with us.
We're your hosts, Rudi and Anniston, and this is Empowered Life.
Welcome back to the Empowered Life Podcast. My name is Anniston, and I am joined by my co-host and husband, Rudi Ricksteins. And we're really excited about today's episode. When we started this podcast, we wanted to make sure that we were open to sharing everything and anything that was going on in our lives and allowing that to inform the content that we put on the podcast. And what we want to share with you today is as it relates to your focus and how you create your reality through what you focus on. And we want to demonstrate this by sharing a story that we recently experienced. And so I'll let Rudi kick it off.
I think it's important that as we share the story, you understand that there's a certain level of accountability that you need to take for everything that you're experiencing in your life. And we understand that we live in an energetic world. And in an energetic world, there's laws and principles that govern how we experience this reality. And what I mean by that is every single thing that you're experiencing. So right now, if there's something in your life that you don't like, somewhere you have aligned with that energy and brought that experience closer to you. And so we're going to elaborate on this a little bit. And I know for some people, that's a really tough pill to swallow. But what I want you to know is that every single experience that you have, you cannot have that experience if you do not align with the energy or the frequency of that experience and draw the experience to you. And so as you contemplate that truth, I want you to hear the story and then see how does it apply to your life, and how could you, if you can, which you totally can, is to take this principle and apply it into your life immediately. So I'm originally from South Africa, and I love South Africa. In fact, I was in a relationship before I met Anniston for years, and the girl that I was dating said to me, "Oh, we're going to live in Canada." And I said, "No, we're never going to live in Canada. We're only ever going to live in South Africa. I love South Africa so much. I am grounded here. I've got businesses at my house, my life, my everything. I love the people. I love the country, never leaving." And she kept dropping hints over years, like really Vancouver, it looks so pretty. It's the same, like we should live. And I said, we're never leaving South Africa. This is where I'm going to be. And then all of a sudden something shifted. And I had a couple of experiences that left me very jaded. And they were all related to crime and to the country feeling like there was just a lot of disruption and unsettlement. And so I made the decision that I was done. And I sold and liquidated all my assets, and I eventually made my plans to move abroad. I met Anniston, we got married, and Anniston is a world traveler. Like when she met me, literally on the very first date night, she was like, we were interviewing each other, dog person, cat person, where do you want to live? And one of the things she said was, do you like to travel? And I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, I love to travel. And I don't think I knew what I was signing up for, because she said to me, I have to have a trip planned every single year. And I have to be able to think and plan and research and read reviews and get organized. And for me, the planning of the trip is more fun than the trip itself. And she says, this is very important to me. And I need to know that, is this okay for you to have these trips? And that sounds amazing. And so I was like, yes, I'm totally in on a trip, and
except you had never actually our honeymoon was your first ever true vacation that you had taken yourself on. So you can understand why I was a little nervous, because for me, seeing the world is so important, and getting outside of the borders of what I see every day is so important. And Rudy just had never been willing to spend money on that kind of thing. For him, it was work, put money into business. So just to preface, that's why it was important that I mention it.
I shamefully say she's right. And it wasn't that I didn't want to spend the money so much on vacations. It was that in my mind, I couldn't reconcile not moving forward. Like, what do you mean? Take time off? Spend money for a hotel when you already have a bed? Like, it just made no sense to me. And so I never took vacations. I just worked and worked and worked. But here I am sitting at a table with this woman that I'm clearly madly in love with, and I've met her hours before that. I don't have the logic or the reason to explain it. And she's saying to me, do you like to travel? And what does it feel like committing to going traveling every single year? And I know this conversation sounds crazy, but it really is how it happened. And I say to her, oh, I love the idea, but let's say one trip a year, because, she didn't say one trip. She just said trips, always a trip in progress. And so I agree, yes, let's do one trip a year. And so long story short, we're already planning our trips. And she very quickly says to me, South Africa has been at the top of my list. I want to go to South Africa. But I've just sold all my assets. I've just made the commitment. I am never going back. Like, I don't want to experience what I experienced. I want to go to a place where I can control the environment and where I feel safer. And now I've met someone, and I'm really, really crazy about in a very short amount of time. And this thing in my brain says, oh, you're never taking her to South Africa. Because if you take her to South Africa, you can't control what's going to happen. You can't control that if something goes wrong, what will that experience be? And it starts touching every single trigger that I could possibly have on the subject of safety. And as a guy, I feel like it's my responsibility to protect her. And I know that's not the truth, but it felt very strongly to me like it's my job, my responsibility. I have to ensure her safety. And there was a part of me that thought, oh, if I take her to South Africa, I can never ensure her safety. And the truth is, that's anywhere in the world you could have experiences. But to me, I had some very raw, open nerves, and they were exposed. And those were just telling me, this is not going to happen. And so I said to her, we're never going to South Africa. And she had that look on her face like, this is one of my bucket list trips. Like, even before I met a South African, I've always wanted to go to South Africa. And I was like, give it up. It's never going to happen. We're never going to go. And she would say, why? And I just said, because I cannot guarantee your safety. Like, I just refuse. Absolutely not. And she brought all the logic to the conversation, all the reason to the conversation, all the reminders of you could be anywhere in the world. It could happen anywhere. It could happen in your home, in your backyard. But I just kept saying no. And so over the years, she tried to break me down. And she's really, really, really good. But it didn't work. I kept saying no. And we've been married now almost 13 years. 13 years come May of 2024. And for 12 years, I successfully got her to stop asking me to go to South Africa. And we've had a trip or multiple trips every single year, and they've all been incredible. I went to Tanzania in 2019, and it was one of the most incredible trips. And I said to her when I came back, oh, I've really missed the country. And I want to show you, but Tanzania feels really safe. Tanzania is a beautiful country, a beautiful place to be. And so I had committed, I'm going to take her to Tanzania. But then obviously the pandemic happened and life carries on until about 6 months ago. Anniston walks into the living room and she says, so. And anytime she starts a sentence with so and a pause, I have to hold my breath because I know something big's coming and I need to be prepared. And she knows I'm not going to be receiving it openly in the beginning. And she starts with the so. And so I hold my breath and I'm waiting for the next sentence. And she says, so one of my dearest friends is getting married. And it's going to be in Cape Town, South Africa. And it's going to be in February. of 2024. And I would really like to go. And this is very, very important to me. And so I had all the information that I needed to be able to make the decision of, we're going to South Africa. And I want you to think about the emotion that came up in this, because all of a sudden, every single trigger, every single wound that I had really was open. And I now had that shift of, I don't feel like I'm in control.
For me, I always knew there was going to be resistance. And so I respected that, because I also believe in the power of creation. And my fear was, well, my gosh, he's held the fear of going back to South Africa for over 12 years, at least since I've known him. And I don't want him to go and create things to be fearful of. And, so I allowed him to work through that on his own. But with this coming up, I always think life puts things in front of you as tests, and we always say our life is really a big university, and we're constantly going through these classes and this curriculum. And so it wasn't just a trip. It wasn't just an opportunity. This was an opportunity for him to clear something that he's carried for so long, but I knew it would never happen until he didn't have a choice. So I went in there, and I didn't give an out. It was either I'm going on my own or you're coming with me. That was basically the options. And I knew he would never let me go by myself, nor would I ever want to go to South Africa on my own, not having seen it with him for the first time. And so thankfully he said yes, but it was not an easy yes. And there was a lot of energy around that yes. And so the work really began, from that point. We had about 2 months prior to going on our trip.
So, I want you to think about that very first night. Here I have all of these emotional reasons for why I don't want to take her to South Africa. And I've, had some hairy experiences, and I never want to be able to put my wife or my kids in an environment where I don't feel like it's safe, or that we're safe, or that they're safe, or that I can't protect them in any moment. And now I'm lying in bed next to the woman that I love more than life itself. And the thoughts that are going through my mind as I lie there is, oh my gosh, now I'm going to put her in this environment and I can't control what's going to happen. I don't know it. I feel all the feels. And so I had a very sleepless night. And the next morning I woke up and I said to her, I'm starting to have all of the anxiety, and I don't really struggle with stress or anxiety. I know how to handle emotions, but I had these emotions and they felt so raw and so real. And I said to her, I'm starting to feel the anxiety of this trip. And we had a beautiful conversation that day. And it was a real eye-opener, because we literally teach that you create the experience that you're having, and that you need to align with the outcome that you want. And that if you're focused on something, you're going to be sending all of your energy into creating that particular outcome. That if you meet someone and you've been prepared beforehand, they're really annoying, they've got this funny way of breathing. When you meet them, you're looking for that. And so you're going to experience that. Or if they say, this person does this one thing, or they talk a certain way, you're going to draw that experience from them, because that becomes your point of focus. And then you're going to find the evidence to meet that. And that is the aligning of the situation. And here Anniston's saying, Rudi, you could create any experience. This doesn't have to be a scary experience, but you've got to shift something in you before we go, because we're going. The question is this going to be an experience where you're in control of the creation of it? Or is this going to be an experience where you have to handle what comes to you?
So we both decided, what do we want this experience to be? And let's align on that, so that both of us can start holding that feeling and that intention every time we think about going. And so that we can start pre-paving. That's what we call pre-paving the path forward, and reaching into our future and dropping the energy that we want to experience there. So we meditate every morning. We prime every morning. This is a technique that Rudi teaches, but for us, meditation is non-negotiable. And it's because of these kinds of things, because this is our time that we create the space to pre-pave and to co-create our future and what that experience is going to be.
So I had a couple of months to rewrite 12 years of emotional input into a very particular outcome. In this instance, it was, South Africa is a scary place. And now I had to rewrite all of the negative thoughts and feelings that I had already pre-paved in that direction, so that when we went, we could experience something new. And so the first thing that I did was that very next morning was to sit in meditation and clear the energy of what I'd already been putting in. And so I started sitting there really calmly, really quietly, feeling the anxiety of the situation come up in my body. And then I started asking more empowered questions. You've heard us talk about this repeatedly on the podcast. And I started saying, is it even true that this experience could be bad? No. Well, I can't say that in a court of law that this is going to be a negative experience. So that's a really good place to start. And I started saying, what if it could be an incredible experience? Is that possible? Well, yes, that's possible. Which one is more likely? And then I'm like, well, it's more likely it's going to be a good experience because, I think about all the times I was there and how nothing ever went wrong, and so we're really focusing on a few key moments as opposed to the totality of the experience. And now I started thinking, well, it really could be a great experience. Then I started asking myself, what things could be great about it? And then I started thinking of the things we would do and we would go. And then all of a sudden, the energy started to change and I started to feel a little relief and I started getting a little excited. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to show her Table Mountain and Neisner and us, my hometown, Neisner. And I started thinking of all these things that we were going to do. And the energy started to get, like an elevated state of eagerness and excitement. And I slipped into anticipation. But I was so close to the nervousness and the excitement that I would tether between the two. And then I went into deep meditation. And when I say deep meditation, I mean, I just stopped thinking about anything. I just took deep breaths in, deep breaths out, released any stress, released any fear, released any anxiety. And then in a state of being really calm, I forecast a dream, a goal, a vision of this being the most magical experience. And I kept using that word. I want this trip to be magical. I created us sitting on the airplane leaving South Africa and her and I turning to each other and saying, wow, what a magical trip. Oh my gosh, this was magical. And so I tapped into the end result of the feeling of what it would feel like to have the trip that I was so desperate to create.
So now it's time to go on the trip. And we are traveling. We traveled with two of our best friends and also a colleague of mine. And we were traveling to South Africa to attend the wedding together. And then we were going to continue on from there to go on safari for a couple of days, this beautiful game reserve, and then on to Rudi's hometown of Neisner. So when we arrive, first, even before we arrive at the airport, we flew out of JFK. Rudi and I, we flew into JFK the night before and we were waiting at the baggage carousel and we're like, look, our bags came out first. Isn't that amazing? And we grab our bags and then the Uber came super quickly. And then the hotel we stayed in was great. And we had an amazing meal and we already had started looking for the magic, right? And so this is really key. And I want you guys to listen to this part because it's not enough to just pre-pave. It's also how you're showing up in the moment and what you're continuing to look for, right? If magic is our target, then that means we have to commit to looking for the magic because what you seek, you will find. Where your energy, where your focus goes, your energy flows, right? And we wanted that to be what bubbled into our awareness. Was it possible for us to find negative things happening around us? Sure. If we were looking for it, I'm sure we would have seen all kinds of things. That guy who was rude and bumped into me in the next to the baggage claim, or, the Uber driver, the car smelled a little funny. I mean, you can find bad anywhere. If you're looking for it, you will find it guaranteed. But we were so committed to this being the most magical 2 weeks of our life that we started from the very beginning. So then we show up to JFK, we meet with our friends and they're saying, oh my gosh, isn't this lounge amazing? And then we got on the plane and it was just the most amazing seats and air hostesses, and we just couldn't stop talking about how great everything was. And this is how the trip started, and this is how it continued.
I want to really emphasize one of the most beautiful points of this entire process because this was a collective creation, right? That 4 people created the end result of this trip, but I can only account for my intention in creating this trip. And what I did for 2.5 months prior to leaving on this trip was to create one feeling. And that feeling was, this is going to be the most magical trip. I want it to be magic. Everything must be magical. And so I would pour the energy in of leaving and then eventually coming home and telling everybody how magical it was. What was so beautiful was throughout the entire trip, all day, every day, every single person in that group, without knowing what was being created in my mind and what they created in their minds, people kept saying, this is so magical. This is so magical. I remember, our friends being in Cape Town and, standing out in the waterfront, looking at this incredible mountain, Table Mountain, this backdrop, this view, and the awe and the look on their faces. And they said, this place is magical. We woke up in the morning and Anniston turned to me and looked at me and she was like, wow, this energy in this place is magical. And then we had this incredible service. And then it just started to create this snowball effect of us compounding magic. And I never shared with anybody that I had created the word magic, and then we would go to the game farm and Anniston or our friends would say, oh, this place is majestic. And I know majestic and magic are not the same, but they're very similar. And so they just kept saying, this place is majestic. This place is magical, the experiences. And then we started creating on the trip. And one of our friends that was with us, he wanted to see a kill. He wanted to see lions in action.
In the wild.
The wild, yeah. And so, so many people were saying to us, oh, that's not something that you can just experience. It's like very rarely does this ever happen. And we're sitting in the back of this safari van and there's these lions and they've already eaten. Their bellies are full. They don't look hungry at all. And the guide says they're going to sleep all day. Like they're done for the day, reading their patterns, their behavior. They're not going to do anything now. But we get to watch them and this is an incredible experience. And it really was. But Anniston turns to him and says, well, why don't you just create that you can see a kill? And he's like, create that you can see a kill? Yeah, just put the energy into that we get to see a kill. And then a third lion that is sitting just a little further away in our view gets up. Well, that lion looks a little hungry. That lion was a little thinner. And the guide says, oh, that's the weaker link in the pack. And so he's responsible for the kills. The others eat first, and if there's anything left over, he gets to eat, and he hasn't eaten. And all of a sudden, this lion gets up, and he starts to go in for a kill. And he starts to run through the bushes and then do this crawl. And, all of us are just caught up in this moment. And the kill never actually happened, but there was an incredible chase, and we got the energy of this experience. And that became another catalyst for us as a reminder that we are always in control of creating the change.
It's so important that you pay attention to the story you're telling. Not only you're telling yourself in your inner narrative, but what you're speaking out loud. And it was something that we talked about a lot with this couple that we were traveling with, because we were doing it without thinking about it. It became unconscious for us to speak about all the things that were going well, so much so that I can't remember one time, not even one time, that there was oh, this isn't great, or ugh, this is, the food, ugh, we always were like, but this is great. And it was so contagious. And it's so important that you pay attention not only to the people that you're around, what story are you telling about yourself and your life to the people that you spend the most time with? Number one, because that's something that's completely in your control. So often we say, oh, but the people I'm around are so negative. Okay, well, what are you bringing to the conversation, right? Are you matching that energy, or are you elevating above that energy? Because when you do, it becomes contagious. And that's what will start to spread. I think it's the rising tides lift all boats. So you have to be, if you are not surrounded by people who are speaking into gratitude, speaking into things that are going well, then you need to curate that for yourself. I spend my mornings oftentimes, obviously, speaking to Rudi and the kids, but then I've got my favorite podcast hosts who are incredibly positive and constantly lifting me up. I have books I'm reading. I have my friendships that are those that lift me up and that are mirroring the behavior that I want to be surrounding myself with. I can't control always the people I'm on calls with throughout the day at work, or, after fact, or at school functions with the kids. But where I can control, I do. And I'm very, very conscious of it. And I believe that, yes, pre-paving and setting your intentions is absolutely so important, because that's really what's going to build the framework of your experience. But it's not enough, because you in the moment need to be so committed to that feeling that you're exuding, like Rudi was exuding the energy of magic. So he had to be an energetic match to it. We're all vibrational beings in a vibrational universe. And this is where I think, and we did a whole 4-part series on manifestation. If you haven't listened to that, definitely go back in the episodes and find it. But the law of attraction, it can get a little confusing sometimes when we talk about, you attract what you think about. Well, it's really more you attract what you feel about. And what you feel is who you become. And that's your energetic vibrational state. So yes, what you think about is going to create a feeling. So absolutely thoughts have their purpose, but they're secondary. They're secondary to how you feel.
So a part of the story that's missing that I think is really important for me to fill in the gaps here is that I had created at least 12, if not more years of stress and anxiety of what it would be like to go to South Africa. And then I spent 2 months creating magic. And a positive thought is 1,000 times more powerful than a negative thought. And so I did a tremendous amount of work overriding what I wanted my experience to be. And then I created the feeling in my body of it being magical, of it being a joyous experience, of us walking away thinking, wow, that was a life-changing, amazing, awe-inspiring trip. Anniston gets to see where I'm from, and we just fall in love. I wanted to fall back in love with this country that I have loved so deeply for so long. And we started to create that experience, and that started first within me. Anniston was already there because she's always wanted to go, and she's always open and receptive. And so we started creating that feeling and that awe. What I haven't shared is that when we arrived in South Africa, the very first night we arrive in South Africa, we get to the hotel and the four of us sit down to have dinner. And I'm seated in a restaurant where there's a TV screen directly above me, and the other three don't see the TV screen. And as I'm sitting there, and I cannot stand being in a restaurant with a TV screen, I find it so distracting. Every time the TV moves, I look up and I see it, and I catch the glimpse of the text on the bottom of the screen. And right there, I read, a woman is assaulted in South Africa every 2 minutes. There's these major car bombings that are happening. They are petrol bombing cars on the highways, warning, warning, they are assassinations. There are these murder, and I just see all this negativity, and that emotion starts to build. And we're literally in the country for hours. And then I sat there at that dinner and I was very quiet. And I chose to consciously take my focus from what I was seeing as the outside stimulation to re-engage what I'd been creating. And I said, well, that doesn't dictate my experience. I'm going to create the experience that I want to have. And I went back into creating, this is just going to be magical. This is going to be magical. And I don't know if my counterparts noticed how quiet I was, but I was very intentional at that dinner in shifting how I felt. At one point, I even got up from the table, walked away, and just cleared all my energy, and then came back and sat down. Because there was such a big shift in reading what was my biggest fear and seeing that on the TV screen as evidence, 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 but I was wanting to create something beautiful. And I was able to successfully shift myself to feeling eager and excited and to create this beautiful, magical moment. And then we leave Cape Town, which was amazing. And we go to a wine farm and we have this incredible wedding. And then we have a really early 4 a.m. wake up call, be in a taxi at 4:30 to take us to the airport. And as we're driving to the airport, we drive past at least 60 tactical police vans. There's burning car tires on the highway, and the police are scraping the rubber from the tires off the road. The vehicles have been moved, the fire's been moved, but the actual tires are still burning on the highway. And we're driving at 4:30 in the morning all the way to the airport, which is through a very dangerous part of the city. And we're on our way to the airport, and there's all these police and these vans, and no one in the car is even paying attention because they're too busy talking about what we're doing and where we're going and how excited we are. And they see the cars, but they don't think anything of it. And my spidey senses are, oh my gosh, they've been petrol bombing cars on this highway minutes or hours before because the police are busy putting out the fire. And that fear comes up. And again, I had to go inward and say, this doesn't have to be my experience.
Yeah. What I love even more is that you didn't say anything. Because honestly, this is the first I'm hearing about that. And it actually brings up a really good point, because what you bring and speak out loud, like anything that you're willing to speak out loud, you have energy around. And when you do, you know that you're going to potentially be enrolling others in that same energy. And I did not know that this is the first time you're telling me about how you were feeling at that dinner. We didn't get back to the hotel room and him say, Anniston, oh my gosh, I didn't want to say anything in front of our friends, but I saw all these things on the news. He didn't say a peep about it. He didn't impact my energy at all. He addressed his. He did a mental and energetic adjustment so that he didn't impact the whole. And we do that a lot. In fact, on this trip as well, we had a situation, I won't go into a long story, but where we were potentially going to lose our return flight back just because of how we had flown through. We wound up taking a different connection and I didn't handle it correctly. And I had called the travel agency that we had booked our flights through, and they had said, "Oh yeah, this is your flights are going to your return flights are automatically going to be canceled, and you're going to have to pay for a new flight and a fee." And I was like, and that's thousands and thousands of dollars. And I called the airline, and the airline said, "No, actually, we see your flight's still confirmed." But I had this worry and this concern, like, what if it is going to be canceled and then we're not going to have a flight back and we're going to have to pay a lot of money to get back? And so I made the decision, similar to Rudi, that I was going to create the outcome I wanted. I wasn't going to talk about it. I wasn't going to worry about it. I wasn't going to stress about it. This is not me putting my head in the sand. This is creation. And by me not talking about it, I wasn't putting the energy out there of an outcome I do not want to experience. So it wasn't until the day we were literally checking in to our flights that I just breathed a big sigh of relief. And then I said, "Rudi, I have to tell you what I've been creating." And of course the flights were fine. And so there's a lesson in every bit of this, because this is really, creation it's not straightforward. There's so many different layers to it. And I think my hope is that through sharing this story, that you have some really key takeaways and how you can use these same principles to create magic for yourself or whatever you want to create.
You see, so the key here is that when you feel an emotion and it's an emotion you don't want to have, so many people enroll other people in on that emotion. "Oh, I saw this on the news. We've got to be careful. We have to be alert." Anniston, when we woke up on the first day in South Africa and we had missed our connection, booked a new flight without going through the travel agent, and that's what caused the potential of the canceled rest of our leg. She got evidence, irrefutable evidence from the travel agency saying your flight is now canceled, right? So that's not something you can question. That's not something you can wish and hope. They said, "Oh no, you're going to lose this leg." That when you miss one section of your flight, the entire thing is automatically defaulted. So she phones the airline, and the airline says, "Yeah, we don't see that." And so they say ours is still connected, but it may still be canceled. But as of now, it looks good. It still shows confirmed, which means the computer system in South Africa from the one airline to the other airline hadn't yet spoken to each other, and the flight was still intact. And the person saying, "You've got to pay an $800 per person fine, plus you've got to pay this, there's all these things, and you'd have to pay the difference in the fare price." And so we're talking a few $1,000s to ensure we keep the flight. But then she came to me and said, "Oh no, they said everything's fine. The flight is intact. As of now, it is intact." And I said, "As of now, it is intact?" And she said, "Yep, as of now, it is intact. All I need you to do is just constantly hold the vision that we're just going to be on that flight and everything's going to be okay." And so I said to her, "Well, that doesn't make me feel really comfortable. I need you to make sure we're on this flight." And she's like, "No, we're good. I'm handling it." And so the next day I walk into the room and she's hanging up the phone and she says, "Yep, everything's good. Just keep holding the vision. Everything's good." And so I let it go. And it wasn't something I carried any energy on. And so the example of me seeing we all saw the police cars, but of me knowing what that meant and seeing the burning rubber and not freaking everybody else out and bringing their awareness to it, I just buried it. For me, seeing the news and the fear that came up and shifting my energy on it, or Anniston just holding the vision that we're going to get on this flight, we took our power back. And so we were able to be relaxed. The alternative would be we would get stressed and be fearful. And then our minds would literally start looking for evidence of what is what we're focusing on. And so your reticular activating system in your brain is going to say, "Oh, you're worried about fear and stress and people being potentially, harmful." Well, you're going to see that evidence and then you're going to experience it. And the more you experience it, the more you're going to feel it. And the more you feel it, the more you're going to create it. And what we're saying is you have creative control. And so in recap,
this is a long roundabout journey we've taken you guys on. In recap, you are creating through your focus. Where your focus goes is what you are honed in on, is what it's going to expand for you, just like a balloon. I want you to imagine that if you are blowing into a balloon, you are very directly blowing air to expand it. Well, when you are focused on something, that's exactly what's happening. And so you're blowing up the balloon of whatever emotional state you want to experience in the future. And thus that balloon is then going to attract all the things that are a match to that. So it is very, very important that whatever you are, let's say you're looking forward to, or there's a meeting coming up, or there's a trip like what we've just been on, that you want to make sure is an absolute success for yourself and your family. Start now. Start pre-paving. Get really, really clear on how you want to feel at the end of whatever that is. And then hold on to that feeling and commit to showing up in the moment, looking for it. And the more that you look for it, the more evidence you're going to find, and the less conscious you'll have to be, because it'll just start becoming unconscious.
And then if you know of anybody that would resonate with this message, we're going to ask you to share this podcast episode. Please rate and review and help us spread the message and the love of what we're wanting to share. Because on the Empowered Life podcast, our responsibility is to remind you that the power lies within you to create everything that you want to experience outside of you. And this is no more true than what you've just heard on this episode. We love you so very much. Thank you for joining us. We'll catch you in the next episode of the Empowered Life podcast.